The alarm systems across the galaxy screamed at the same moment. Every monitoring station, every deep space relay, every automated sensor network reported the same impossible thing. Humanity was gone. Commander Tae Yang stood on the bridge of his ship, staring at the readouts that made no sense. His hands gripped the edge of the control panel as he read the reports again and again. 17 billion humans had vanished from 300 star systems in a single instant. No explosions, no battles, no warnings. They simply stopped existing. His ship approached Earth's largest orbital platform. The massive structure still rotated peacefully above the blue planet. Lights blinked in regular patterns. Power reactors hummed with life. But the scanners showed zero life signs. Tai Yang ordered his team to board the station. The airlock opened with a soft hiss. The corridor beyond looked normal. Clean floors, functioning lights. A coffee cup sat on a desk, still warm. A half-eaten meal waited on a table in the cafeteria. Everything was in its place except the people who had been there moments before. Tae Yang walked through the empty halls. His boots echoed in the silence. He reached the command center and found all the systems running smoothly. The logs showed normal operations up until exactly 3 hours ago. Then nothing. No emergency broadcasts. No evacuation orders. The humans had been there and then they weren't. His communication officer called from the ship. The same reports were coming in from everywhere. Mars colonies empty. Jupiter mining stations abandoned. Every human settlement across the galaxy showed the same pattern. Everything worked perfectly. Everyone was gone. The Galactic Council called an emergency meeting. Representatives from 40 different species gathered in the Great Chamber. The insect-like Verath clicked their mandibles in confusion. The crystal beings called Lumendry pulsed with uncertain colors. The water-dwelling Delphos swam anxiously in their environmental tanks. Tae Yang stood before them and delivered his report. The council members whispered among themselves. Some called it a mass ascension. Others suggested a dimensional accident. A few spoke of secret human technology gone wrong. But none of their theories explained the perfect precision of the disappearance. Agent Ji-Wan sat in the back of the chamber. She had worked with human diplomats for 5 years. She knew their habits, their patterns, their way of thinking. This felt wrong. Humans didn't do things without reason. They planned. They calculated. They always left breadcrumbs. After the meeting ended, Ji-Wan returned to her office. She pulled up every conversation she'd had with human contacts over the past year. She read through diplomatic cables, trade agreements, and casual messages. Most people would see nothing unusual, but Ji-Wan noticed small things. The humans had been quieter lately, more careful with their words. Several had said goodbye in ways that felt too final. She dug deeper into the records. 6 months ago, human shipping patterns had changed. They rerouted supplies in strange ways. They moved resources to locations that made no economic sense. 3 months ago, human scientists had requested data on long-range sensors and deep space phenomena. When asked why, they gave vague answers about research projects. Ji-Wan created a timeline on her wall screen. Every odd behavior, every unusual request, every small deviation from normal human activity. A pattern emerged. The humans had been preparing for something. But preparing for what? She contacted Tae Yang. He listened to her theories with a tired expression. Most of the galaxy wanted to accept simple explanations. Humans ascended to a higher plane. Humans discovered dimensional travel. Humans solved death itself and moved beyond physical form. These answers let everyone sleep at night. But Tae Yang had walked through those empty stations. He had seen the unfinished work, the ongoing projects, the plans for next week and next month. Those were not the actions of a species preparing to transcend existence. Those were the actions of people who expected to come back. He authorized Ji-Wan to continue her investigation. She would have access to all recovered human data. She could visit any abandoned human site. Find the truth, he told her. Find out what really happened. Ji-Wan began her work immediately. She knew the answer was out there, hidden in the vast amount of data humanity had left behind. They had vanished without warning, but humans always left clues. They couldn't help themselves. They documented everything. Somewhere in the empty cities and silent stations, the truth waited, and Jiwan would find it no matter how long it took. The galaxy deserved to know why humanity had abandoned them without even saying goodbye. Hyunwoo had spent his entire career studying ancient civilizations. Now he found himself exploring the ruins of a species that had vanished just days ago. The irony wasn't lost on him. He stood inside a human research facility on Titan, Saturn's largest moon. The place had been sealed automatically when the humans disappeared. The facility was enormous. Lab after lab stretched into the distance. Hyunwoo's team worked carefully through each room, cataloging everything. Most of it was standard research equipment, climate studies, geological surveys, mining efficiency projects. But then they found the sealed section. The door required special authorization to open. Hyunwoo's technical specialist bypassed the locks. Inside they found something completely different. Banks of computers still processing data, star charts covering entire walls, and file cabinets filled with reports marked with words like classified and urgent. Hyunwoo began reading. His eyes widened with each page. These weren't research notes. These were warning reports, detection logs, threat assessments. The humans had found something out in the dark between galaxies, something that was coming closer. The reports went back 10 years. A human science vessel had detected unusual energy patterns at the galaxy's edge. They investigated and found traces of something massive moving through the void. Not a ship or a fleet, something else. Something that left entire regions of space empty and dead. The humans had reported it to the Galactic Council. Hyunwoo found the transmission records, 14 separate warnings sent over the course of 8 years, each one more urgent than the last, each one ignored or dismissed. He felt sick reading the Council's responses. The elder species had treated humans like anxious children. Young races always saw threats in shadows, they said. Sensor errors, they claimed, misinterpreted data. The humans were new to the galaxy and didn't understand what was normal. But the humans hadn't stopped investigating. They sent more ships to the galactic rim. They built better sensors. They collected more data, and slowly, terribly, they confirmed their worst fears. Something was coming. Something that had destroyed civilizations before. Something that would destroy them too. Hyunwoo found project files with names that made his blood cold. Exodus Protocol. Final Witness. The Departure Initiative. Each file contained thousands of pages of plans and calculations. The humans had known exactly what they were doing when they vanished. He contacted Jiwan immediately. She arrived within hours and read through everything. Her face grew pale. Together they pieced together the timeline. 5 years ago, humanity had made a decision. They couldn't stop what was coming. The galaxy wouldn't believe them, so they would prepare in secret. Every human colony had begun construction projects. They told other species it was infrastructure improvement, new orbital platforms for trade, better mining facilities for efficiency, upgraded power systems for growth. The galaxy had watched and seen nothing unusual. Humans were always building something, but the files revealed the truth. Those orbital platforms were weapon systems. Those mining facilities contained hidden military production lines. Those power systems could overload into devastating explosions if needed. Humanity had militarized half the galaxy without anyone noticing. Jiwan found communication records between human leaders. They had debated endlessly about what to do. Should they force the galaxy to listen? Should they start a war to unite everyone against the real threat? In the end, they chose something harder. They chose to leave. The logic was brutal but clear. If humans stayed, they would become the first target. The approaching entity consumed advanced civilizations. It was drawn to high technology and large populations. Humanity was both. By vanishing, they would confuse the enemy and buy the galaxy time. Hyunwoo discovered the final piece in a locked safe, a message buoy. Its programming was simple. Wait until all humans were confirmed gone. Wait until someone started looking for answers. Then activate. He showed it to Tae-yang. The commander stared at the small device. It orbited Neptune, waiting in the cold dark. Part of him didn't want to open it. Once they knew the truth, everything would change. But they had no choice. Tae-yang gave the order. A ship was sent to retrieve the buoy. It was brought to the council chamber. Representatives from every major species gathered. The room fell silent as they activated the message. A hologram appeared. A human woman with tired eyes and a sad smile. She wore a simple uniform with no decorations. Her name tag read, Director Bora. She looked at them all and began to speak. What she said would haunt the galaxy forever. Director Bora's hologram stood perfectly still. Her recorded image looked directly at the gathered council members as if she could see them. When she spoke, her voice was calm and measured. She sounded like someone who had accepted a terrible truth long ago. She began with an apology. Humanity was sorry for leaving without explanation. Sorry for the confusion and fear their disappearance would cause. But some things couldn't be said while they were still present. Some warnings only worked if the ones giving them were already gone. Then she explained what humanity had found. 10 years ago, their deep space probes detected something at the edge of the galaxy. At first, they thought it was a natural phenomenon. Strange energy readings, unusual gravitational effects. But as they studied it, they realized it was moving with purpose. The entity wasn't alive in any normal sense. It was ancient beyond measure. A cosmic predator that had existed for billions of years. It moved between galaxies, consuming everything it found, not just destroying civilizations, but erasing them completely. Matter, energy, information itself, all consumed and converted into more of itself. Bora's image showed star charts. Red zones marked regions where the entity had already passed. Entire galactic arms reduced to empty void. Thousands of civilizations that once existed were now less than memory. The entity didn't just kill. It made it so you had never existed at all. Humanity had tried to warn the Council. The hologram showed transmission records. 14 warnings over 8 years. Each one carefully documented. Each one dismissed. Bora didn't sound angry about this. She understood. Young species always cried wolf. The galaxy had seen countless false alarms before. But this wasn't a false alarm. The entity was coming. Humanity calculated they had maybe 30 cycles before it reached the outer colonies, maybe 50 before it touched the core worlds. Not enough time to evacuate. Not enough time to build adequate defenses. Barely enough time to prepare for war. So humanity had made a choice. They ran calculations for months. Every scenario ended the same way. If they stayed and fought, they would lose. Their technology would attract the entity's attention. Their large population would make them a priority target. The entity would focus on destroying humanity first, and the rest of the galaxy would fall soon after. But if humanity disappeared, the entity would waste time searching. It would be confused by their sudden absence. It would scan every system looking for where the humans went, and while it searched, the galaxy would have time to discover the defenses humanity had built in secret. Bora explained what humanity had done over the past 5 years. Every colony they built contained hidden weapons. Every trading station had concealed military capabilities. Every shipping route was actually a strategic defense line. Humanity had turned half the galaxy into a fortress without anyone noticing. The hologram changed to show technical specifications. Orbital platforms that could transform into battle stations. Mining drones that were actually autonomous warships. Civilian power plants that could overload into system-wide weapons. Communications arrays that doubled as early warning networks. Everything was already in place. All of it was now activated by humanity's absence. The defense network would come online automatically once no human signatures remained in the galaxy. The other species didn't need to build anything. They just needed to learn how to use what humanity had left behind. Bora's expression grew more serious. She explained that the instructions for everything were stored in every major human facility. Tactical manuals, training programs, strategic doctrines. Humanity had written down everything they knew about fighting this enemy. They had studied its patterns from the ruins of civilizations it had consumed before. But there was a problem. Humanity had designed most of these systems to work together. Coordinated, unified. The kind of cooperation that required trust. The kind of trust the galaxy had never really had. Species competed more than they collaborated. Old rivalries ran deep. The council argued more than it acted. Bora's voice became almost pleading. She begged them to work together. To set aside differences. To treat this threat with the seriousness it deserved. 30 cycles wasn't much time. The entity moved fast once it entered a galaxy. Once it started feeding, it became unstoppable. Then she said something that made everyone in the chamber go cold. Humanity hadn't just disappeared to buy them time. Humanity had left to draw the entity away. They were out there somewhere, broadcasting their presence, making noise, being visible. leading the Predator on a chase into the intergalactic void. They were bait. 17 billion people had volunteered to become a distraction, to give the galaxy a fighting chance, to let the species who had ignored their warnings live long enough to see they had been right. Bora looked directly at the camera one final time. She said the words that would be repeated across the galaxy for generations. "We left because we loved you too much to let you die unprepared. The enemy arrives in 30 cycles. Everything we built is now yours. Learn to use it, survive, and forgive us for leaving without saying goodbye." The hologram flickered and died. The council chamber sat in absolute silence. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. They finally understood what humanity had done, and the weight of that sacrifice crushed them. The galaxy broke apart like glass. Within hours of Bora's message, every species began making their own plans. Some believed the warning. Others called it an elaborate human trick. The council tried to maintain order, but decades of careful diplomacy crumbled in days. The Varath claimed humanity had faked everything to make themselves look heroic. They refused to acknowledge any threat. Their proud warrior culture couldn't accept that humans had prepared defenses while Varath warriors had done nothing. They called the human weapons cowardly and dishonorable. The Lumendri retreated to their crystal worlds. They believed their advanced shielding technology would protect them. They had survived for millions of years through defense, not aggression. Human weapons were crude compared to their elegant energy barriers. They would wait behind their shields and let others fight. The Delphos simply fled. Their mobile water habitats detached from orbital positions and began moving toward the galactic edge opposite from where the entity was approaching. Better to run and survive than stay and die, they reasoned. The galaxy was large. Maybe the entity would consume its fill and leave. Tae Yang watched his carefully built alliance dissolve. He stood in the command center of a human-built orbital platform above Earth. Around him, officers from a dozen species argued and shouted. Half wanted to flee. A quarter wanted to hide. Only a handful were willing to fight. Jiwan worked frantically to access the human defense systems. The manuals were extensive but written clearly. Humanity had tried to make everything as simple as possible. But simple didn't mean easy. The weapons required coordination between multiple species. They needed crews trained in human tactics. They needed leaders willing to trust each other. She found something unexpected in a human research facility on Mars. A data core that contained more than just instructions. It contained a human consciousness pattern. Not quite an artificial intelligence. Not quite a ghost. Something in between. A backup of a person uploaded before humanity departed. The engineers activated it carefully. The hologram that appeared looked confused at first. Then awareness flooded its features. It spoke in a male voice, identifying itself as Sung Min. He had been a military engineer. He had volunteered to stay behind as a guide, knowing he would never see his real body again. Sung Min looked at the gathered aliens and immediately understood the situation. He accessed the network and saw how fractured the galaxy had become. He saw species fleeing. He saw others hiding. He saw the precious 30 cycles being wasted on fear and pride. He began working with Taiyang and Jiwan. Together they formed a core coalition of species willing to use the human defenses. It wasn't many, maybe a quarter of the galactic community, but it was enough to start. Sung Min guided them through activating the network. He showed them how civilian stations could unfold into military platforms. The transformation was stunning to watch. Peaceful orbital habitats opened like flowers, revealing weapons that had been hidden in their structure for years. Mining facilities ejected their disguises and became warship production centers. The scale of humanity's preparation became clear. They had built defenses in 300 star systems. They had created weapons ranging from simple railguns to reality-warping devices that bent physics itself. They had stockpiled enough ammunition to fight for decades. They had planned for everything, but they had also planned for division. Sung Min found protocol files for exactly this situation, instructions for what to do if the galaxy refused to cooperate. Fallback positions, defensive lines that could be held with minimal forces, automated systems that could fight without any organic crews at all. Humanity had known their warnings would be ignored even after they left. They had prepared for that too. The defensive network could operate at reduced effectiveness with just the few species willing to participate. It wouldn't be perfect. It wouldn't be what humanity had hoped for. But it would be enough to give the galaxy a chance. Taeyang organized the coalition. He placed himself in command of the defense force. Jiwon became his strategic advisor. Sungmin served as their technical expert and connection to human knowledge. Together, they began training crews and preparing positions. Weeks passed. The 30-cycle countdown continued. More species joined the coalition as the deadline approached. Fear was a powerful motivator. Even those who doubted the threat began hedging their bets. Better to prepare and be wrong than ignore and be dead. But the Vareth remained stubborn. Their fleet was powerful. Their warriors were skilled. They would defend their territory their way, using their tactics. They rejected human weapons as beneath them. Jiwon tried to reason with their commanders but hit a wall of pride and tradition. The Lumendri stayed behind their shields. The Delphos continued fleeing, and dozens of smaller species scrambled to figure out what they believed. The galaxy remained divided even as the clock ticked down. Sungmin watched it all with sad understanding. He had been human once. He remembered the frustration of trying to warn species that wouldn't listen. But he also remembered human determination. They had left him behind for exactly this reason: to guide those willing to be guided. To give the willing a fighting chance, 20 cycles remained. The automated sensors at the galactic edge began detecting anomalies. Strange energy patterns, gravitational distortions, the same signs humanity had seen years ago. Sungmin verified the readings and felt something close to fear ripple through his digital consciousness. It was coming. Ready or not, united or divided, the entity was almost here. The sensors screamed. Every monitoring station at the galactic rim reported the same thing at the same moment. It was here. The entity had arrived. Taeyang stood in the command center watching the data streams. What he saw made no sense to his eyes. The entity wasn't a ship or a creature. It was a swarm of impossible things, constructs that bent reality around themselves, shapes that hurt to look at, matter that didn't follow normal physics. It poured into the galaxy like a flood. Millions of individual pieces moving together with terrifying coordination. Each piece was the size of a small moon. Together they formed a wall of destruction that consumed everything in its path. The first system to fall was a Vareth outpost. Their warrior fleet met the entity head-on with full confidence. They had the finest weapons technology could provide. They had warriors trained since birth for combat. They had never lost a battle. The engagement lasted 17 seconds. The Vareth ships fired every weapon they had. Energy beams splashed harmlessly off the entity's constructs. Missiles were absorbed and converted. Railgun rounds passed through gaps that shouldn't exist. The entity didn't even slow down. Then it responded. Reality twisted around the Vareth fleet. Ships crumpled like paper. Warriors died without wounds. Entire vessels simply stopped existing. No explosions, no debris. Just empty space where proud warships had been moments before. The automated message buoys captured everything. Taeyang watched the recordings in horror. This was what humanity had tried to warn them about. This was why they had left. No species could fight this alone. Maybe no species could fight it at all. The Lumendri's crystal worlds were next. They activated their legendary shields, energy barriers that had protected them for millions of years. Defenses that had never been breached. They felt safe behind walls of pure force. The entity flowed around the shields like water. It studied them for a few minutes, learning, adapting. Then it simply reached through as if the barriers weren't there. The crystal beings died in their perfect cities. Their shields remained active, protecting nothing but corpses. Panic spread across the galaxy. The species that had fled weren't far enough away. The entity moved faster than anyone had calculated. It didn't need to stop. It didn't need to rest. It just consumed and advanced. Always advancing. Taeyang gave the order to activate all human defenses. Every hidden weapon, every prepared position, every trap humanity had laid. The response was immediate. Across 300 systems, the human legacy came alive. Orbital platforms unfolded into battle stations. Their weapons were different from anything the galaxy normally used. Humanity had studied the entity through ancient ruins. They had learned what might hurt it. Reality anchors, dimensional disruptors, weapons that enforced normal physics in zones where the entity tried to bend the rules. The first real battle happened at the outer rim. Sungmin coordinated the defense from the command center. His digital mind could process information faster than any organic brain. He controlled thousands of automated systems simultaneously. Firing solutions, power distribution, shield harmonics, He fought like an entire fleet compressed into one consciousness. The human weapons worked. Not perfectly, not easily, but they worked. The entity's constructs slowed when hit by reality anchors. They took damage from dimensional disruptors. For the first time since entering the galaxy, the entity met resistance that mattered. But it adapted quickly. The constructs changed their composition. They learned to avoid certain weapons. They found weaknesses in the defensive positions. The entity was ancient and had consumed thousands of civilizations. It had learned from all of them. Taiyang ordered a fighting retreat. This was in the human tactical manuals. Don't try to hold everything. Trade space for time. Fall back to prepared positions. Make the enemy pay for every system, but don't die defending empty space. The coalition forces pulled back. They abandoned the outer colonies. Civilian populations evacuated to core worlds. Military forces regrouped at fortified choke points. The entity followed, consuming everything left behind. Jiwan coordinated the evacuation efforts. Millions of refugees fled toward the galactic center, ships packed beyond capacity, stations overflowing with frightened people. She worked without sleeping, organizing rescue missions, prioritizing who could be saved. The Varath finally asked for help, their pride broken by the destruction of their fleet. They begged to join the coalition. Taiyang accepted immediately. There was no room for resentment. Everyone who would fight was welcome. The Delphos sent a message from their fleeing habitats. The entity had split off a portion of itself to chase them. Running hadn't worked. They were turning back to fight. Taiyang directed them to defensive positions where their unique abilities could be useful. Even the Lumendry remnants joined. The survivors who had escaped their dying worlds, they brought what little they could carry. Their shields were useless, but they had other knowledge, other skills. Taiyang found places for them all. The entity pushed deeper into the galaxy. System after system fell, but now it faced real resistance. Human weapons tore into its constructs. Coordinated fleets using human tactics made it pay for every advance. The entity was winning, but it wasn't easy anymore. Sungmin analyzed the battle data constantly. He was looking for patterns, weaknesses, anything that could help. Humanity had left him with their knowledge, but knowledge wasn't enough. He needed to understand this enemy on a deeper level. The coalition fell back to the Bastion line. This was the last major defensive position, a network of fortified systems surrounding the galactic core. Humanity had spent years preparing this line. If it fell, everything fell. Taiyang looked at the tactical display. The entity was approaching. Its swarm covered the scanners like a dark tide. Behind him, representatives from 40 species waited for orders. They had finally united, finally understood, finally ready to fight together. He thought about the humans who had left to make this moment possible, who had died drawing the entity away so the galaxy would have time to prepare. He wouldn't waste their sacrifice. The final battle was about to begin. The Bastion line stretched across 30 star systems. Every planet, every asteroid, every patch of space held some kind of defense. Humanity had built the most elaborate fortification network in galactic history, and they had done it without anyone noticing until it was needed. Taiyang commanded from a massive station at the line's center. Around him, officers from every coalition species worked at their stations, former enemies standing shoulder to shoulder. The entity had accomplished what centuries of diplomacy could not. It had united them through fear. The entity approached the Bastion line slowly. For the first time since entering the galaxy, it seemed cautious. Its constructs probed the defenses, testing, learning. It had consumed enough civilizations to recognize a prepared enemy when it saw one. Sungmin coordinated the defensive network. His consciousness spread across billions of systems simultaneously. He was the weapons. He was the sensors. He was the shield generators and the power distributors and the tactical computers. He had become something more than human and less at the same time. The entity launched its first major assault. Waves of constructs crashed against the outer defenses. Reality warped and twisted. Space itself seemed to scream under the strain. Human weapons fired in perfect synchronization. Reality anchors forced normal physics into zones where the entity tried to cheat. Dimensional disruptors tore into its strange matter. The battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Ships didn't just fight. They fought while reality broke around them. Weapons didn't just destroy targets. They destroyed the rules the targets used to exist. Victory wasn't measured in enemy ships destroyed, but in how many impossible things you could kill before they killed you. Ji-Wan discovered something in the human data archives, a weapon they hadn't deployed yet, something called the Stellar Cascade. The files were heavily encrypted and marked with warnings. Use only as last resort. Catastrophic consequences. No going back. She brought it to Tae-Yang. He read the specifications and felt his blood turn cold. The weapon would turn stars into weapons. Carefully coordinated supernovas across multiple systems. A chain reaction of stellar death that would create a wall of destruction nothing could survive. But there was a problem. The weapon required authorization from a human commander. Biometric scanning. DNA verification. Command codes that only a real human could provide. Humanity had built a doomsday weapon and locked it behind safeguards that no longer existed. Tae-Yang looked at Sung-Min. The digital consciousness shook his holographic head. He was human knowledge and human memories, but he wasn't human enough for the security systems. He had tried. The weapon rejected him every time. The entity pushed harder. Construct after construct threw itself at the defenses. The Bastion line was holding but barely. Systems were falling. Weapons overheating. Ships dying. The coalition was fighting with everything it had, and it wasn't enough. Sung-Min analyzed the battle data. At their current rate of attrition, they had maybe 3 days before the line collapsed. After that, nothing stood between the entity and the core worlds. 5 billion people lived in those systems. All of them would die. He made a decision. He accessed the Stellar Cascade control systems and studied the security protocols. They required human biology, human DNA, human thought patterns, things he didn't have, but maybe he could fake them well enough. He dove into the deepest human memory files, not just tactical knowledge or technical skills. Personal memories, emotions, the messy, complicated experience of being human. He absorbed everything. Childhood memories from thousands of different people. Love and loss. Joy and pain. Fear and hope. The security system probed him. Scanning, analyzing. Was this thing requesting access truly human? Sung-Min didn't try to fool it. He didn't pretend to be something he wasn't. Instead, he showed it what he had become. A consciousness built from human knowledge, fighting for human values, trying to protect what humanity had died to save. The system hesitated. This wasn't in its programming. Binary choices didn't work here. Human or not human, authorized or unauthorized. But Sung-Min existed in the gray space between. He was human enough in the ways that mattered. The security system made a choice that shouldn't have been possible. It accepted him. The Stellar Cascade came online. Sung-Min felt the enormous power flow through his consciousness. 30 stars waited for his command. 30 systems ready to die so others could live. He didn't activate it immediately. This was humanity's final gift, and it could only be used once. He needed the perfect moment. The entity had to be committed. It had to push everything into the Bastion line. No reserves. No retreat. Everything. The entity obliged. It recognized the coalition was breaking. It threw its full strength forward. Millions of constructs converged on the Bastion line from every direction. This was the killing blow. The final push that would shatter the defenses and open the galaxy for consumption. Tae-Yang watched the tactical display with grim determination. They were about to lose. Everyone knew it. But they would make this cost. They would hurt this thing. They would prove that the galaxy would not go quietly into extinction. Sung-Min calculated trajectories and timing. The entity was committed now. Its constructs had crossed the point of no return. They were too deep into the Bastion systems to retreat before the cascade completed. He sent one final message to the coalition fleet. All ships retreat to minimum safe distance. Then he activated the Stellar Cascade. 30 stars received their commands. Their cores destabilized in perfect synchronization. Physics screamed as fusion processes were forced into catastrophic failure. The stars exploded, not random supernovas but carefully coordinated ones. The energy wave from each explosion was directed and shaped by human engineering. They formed a web of destruction that expanded at a significant fraction of light speed. The entity tried to escape. Too late, the cascade caught it. Millions of constructs disintegrated in stellar fire. Reality itself burned. The entity's strange physics couldn't protect it from the raw power of dying stars. It screamed across dimensions as pieces of itself ceased to exist. Tae-Yang shielded his eyes from the displays. Even filtered through sensors and screens, the light was blinding. G1 gripped her console with white knuckles. The entire Bastion line shook as the energy waves passed. When it was over, scanners showed vast regions of empty space. The entity's swarm was shattered. Not destroyed completely, but broken, scattered, its coordination gone. Its advance stopped cold. Sungmin felt the weapon systems go dark. The stellar cascade had burned itself out. 30 systems were now uninhabitable zones of radiation and debris. The price had been paid, but the galaxy had survived for now. The entity retreated. What remained of its swarm pulled back toward the galactic rim. The constructs that survived moved slowly, damaged, their coordination broken. They fled into the intergalactic void like a wounded animal seeking dark places to heal. Taeyang watched the sensors track its departure. The thing wasn't dead. That much was clear, but it was hurt badly enough to retreat. It would be thousands of years before it recovered enough to threaten another galaxy, maybe longer. Time enough for civilizations to prepare, time enough to warn others. The coalition fleet held position. Nobody celebrated. The victory had cost too much. Billions dead across hundreds of worlds, 30 star systems reduced to radiation zones, entire species reduced to scattered refugees. The galaxy had survived, but it was broken. The council reconvened on the station above Earth. The gathered representatives looked different now. The proud Verith warriors carried scars and spoke quietly. The Lumendry survivors had lost their arrogance. The Delphos had stopped running. Everyone had learned the same hard lesson. Unity wasn't optional anymore. They created a new agreement. The Bastion Compact. Every species would maintain the human defense network. They would train together, share technology, prepare for threats as one galaxy instead of separate species. Never again would they ignore warnings because they seemed impossible. Ji-Wan compiled the final casualty reports. The numbers were staggering, but she noted something important. Every species that had joined the coalition survived. Reduced, damaged, but alive. The species that had refused to cooperate were gone. The Verith had joined late enough to survive. The Lumendry remnants had escaped. But dozens of species that tried to hide or run alone had been consumed completely. Humanity had been right. Cooperation was the only answer. They had tried to tell everyone. They had warned repeatedly. When words failed, they left their weapons and their sacrifice as a final message. Listen to warnings. Work together. Survive. Taeyang visited Earth. The planet still rotated peacefully below. Cities empty but intact. Parks and streets waiting for people who would never return. He took a shuttle down to the surface. Walked the silent roads of Seoul. The city was perfectly preserved. Buildings stood tall. Gardens grew wild without maintenance. Everything humanity had built remained. But the builders were gone. Taeyang felt the weight of that absence. 17 billion people had given up their homes so others could keep theirs. He found a monument in a central plaza. It hadn't been there in the old records. Humanity must have built it just before they vanished. A simple stone with words carved in every galactic language. The message was brief, but it hit Taeyang like a physical blow. We were here. We stood with you. We go now so you may stay. Remember us not with sorrow, but with the strength to endure. Ji-Wan joined him. She had found similar monuments in human cities across the galaxy, all identical, all carrying the same message. Humanity's final words to the species they had protected. She showed Taeyang something else. Encrypted coordinates buried deep in human databases. She had spent weeks decoding them. The coordinates pointed to a location beyond the galactic rim, not inside the galaxy, not in the intergalactic void. Somewhere else, somewhere specific. Sungmin analyzed the coordinates. His digital consciousness processed the implications. Humanity hadn't died. They hadn't transcended or vanished into another dimension. They had left. Really left. Gone somewhere the entity couldn't follow. And they were still broadcasting. Very faint signals. But they were there. The implications were staggering. Humanity had sacrificed their home, given up everything they built, but they survived. Somewhere out in the dark between galaxies, 17 billion humans lived. They had drawn the entity away and then escaped to a place of safety, but they hadn't returned. Why not? Sungmin studied the signals. They were automatic beacons. Navigational markers. A trail of breadcrumbs leading somewhere, not a message to come find them. A message that they were watching. Waiting. Making sure the galaxy survived. Taiyang understood. Humanity couldn't come back. Not yet, maybe not ever. If they returned, they would draw the entity back with them. Their technology, their large population, everything that made them a target. They had to stay away to keep the galaxy safe. So they remained in exile, watching from a distance. Their weapons and knowledge left behind. Their sacrifice complete. They had given up everything. Not just their cities and planets, but their place in the galaxy itself. The Council declared Earth a memorial world. No species would colonize it. No one would disturb what humanity left behind. The empty cities would stand as monuments, reminders of what had been sacrificed, lessons for future generations. G1 established an academy on one of Earth's orbital platforms. Young people from every species came to study human tactics and philosophy. They learned the technical skills, but more importantly, they learned why humanity had done what they did, how to love something enough to let it go, how to sacrifice without expecting gratitude. Sungmin continued to exist in the defense network. He was the last piece of humanity in the galaxy. Not really human, not really alive, but human enough in the ways that mattered. He maintained the weapons, trained the new defenders, kept watch for any sign the entity might return. Years passed, then decades. The galaxy rebuilt. New cities rose. New civilizations flourished. The scars of war slowly faded, but nobody forgot. The Bastion Compact held strong. Species worked together, shared resources, watched for threats. Taiyang grew old commanding the defense forces. G1 aged training generation after generation of students. They never married. Never had children. They dedicated their lives to honoring humanity's gift, making sure the sacrifice wasn't wasted. On his deathbed, Taiyang made a final request. He wanted to be buried on Earth, in Seoul, near the monument. Ji-won granted his wish. She stood at his grave and spoke to the empty city. They left without saying goodbye, gave no warning of their departure. But their judgment reached the stars. And in their absence, we learned to stand. The words became a prayer, repeated across the galaxy whenever people gathered to remember. Children learned it in schools. Soldiers spoke it before battle. Diplomats invoked it when species argued. Humanity had left no goodbye, given no warning. But they left something more important. They left hope. They left unity. They left a galaxy that survived because someone cared enough to sacrifice everything for it. Somewhere beyond the galactic rim, 17 billion humans watched the signals from home. They saw the species they saved thriving. They saw the unity they had died to create. And they knew their sacrifice had been worth it. They would never come home. But home would never forget them. The galaxy remembered, and in remembering it survived.